Welcome to CrystalMaker 10. In this tutorial we're going to have a look at different ways of annotating your structure. CrystalMaker offers three different types of annotation: atom labels, bond labels, and an annotation overlay. Let's start with atom labels. You can quickly toggle atom labels on or off using the Model menu's Show or Hide Atom Labels command. Another way in which you can control atom labels is to go to the Atoms Inspector and to go to the Label column. And we can label atoms by chemical element by clicking the Label button in the Element row, or by individual site. So if we open up the disclosure triangle here next to the element symbol, we can see the sites that have carbon on, and we can label individual sites. We can also label individual atoms. So for example, we might want to label all the atoms in this particular molecule, and to do that we can select the atoms that we want to label. Let's just select this ring of 6 carbon atoms, and then if we go to the Selection Inspector on the right, you'll see there is a Show Label checkbox. Now, what about the content of these labels? Well, we can have whatever we like in an atom label. We can select an atom and go to the Atoms Inspector, and we can type a new label. This is currently C1. I can type new label in here, and that then appears for this individual atom. By default, CrystalMaker gives you some choices for atom labels, and these choices are managed in the Model Inspector under the Label group, and this is also where you can change the size of your labels. So if you go to Label Type, you can see Atom Label is the default. This is the atom label or the site label for a crystal. You can also display the chemical element, the atom number, the height in angstroms, the fractional height, and the fractional coordinates. If we go to our Bonds Inspector, you see the different types of bond specifications for this structure, and each specification has a label checkbox. So if we want to, we can label all bonds of a particular type with their length, and this appears next to the bond. Now, as with atoms, you can also individually select bonds. You hold the Shift key down to extend the selection, and go to the Selection Inspector and click the Show Label checkbox for the bond. If we move to the toolbar, we have an Annotate button. If we click that, we get a popover that lets us add one of 4 types of annotation object to our structure: text boxes, lines, single arrows, or double arrows. Let's add a text box. We have a new text box that appears in the center of the screen. I can click and drag that to a new position and double click to edit its content. Now I want to add a Greek letter here, so I want to have an alpha symbol, so I can select this. Now if you're using a Mac, you can go up to the Show Emoji and Symbols box in the toolbar and just add a Greek letter. So I actually have this in my favorites, alpha. Now let's also add the chemical formula for dichlorobenzene. So C6H4Cl2. So let's reposition this, and I want to make this centered. So I go to my Selection Inspector and we'll center the text, and we'll increase the font size. Notice the text wraps here. I'm going to put a return character in here, so we have dichlorobenzene on one line, and let's emphasize this. Let's make this red. So we'll just change the color, and let's underline it as well. And we want some subscripts, and the easiest way to do that is to click on the subscript button in the Selection Inspector. Now the text box can have other properties. We can add a frame, maybe a shadow, and so on. Now we can also have text boxes with no content. You can use these as frames. So let's emphasize one molecule. Let's add a new text box. Let's blank out the content, but let's add several lines. And let's add a frame to this particular text box. And let's resize it horizontally. Now I need to add some dummy lines to make the text box a bit bigger. And there we've emphasized the single molecule. And maybe we'll have an arrow. So let's choose an arrow. Click and drag on these selection points. You can also change the ordering of text boxes. You can move them to the front or send them to the back. And let's add a label. So we'll have a new text box and we're going to type isolated molecule. We can select multiple text boxes by shift clicking on them, and then we can move them around if we need to. Any selected text box can be edited using the selection inspector. So that's a quick summary of annotation objects in CrystalMaker: atom labels, bond labels, and the annotation overlay.